Good morning.
Morning. How
Morning,
you doing?
Emuron.
Hey, what's happening?
Today we
Yes.
have the pleasure of recording from Nairobi Design Week.
That's true.
And I have the pleasure here of interviewing one of the creative minds that's really doing amazing work in this market. And as we get into this interview, I hope you go on this journey with me and really by the end of it, have a greater sense of what Nairobi has to offer.
True.
So as I typically do and introduce myself, my name is Buyi Mafoko. I'm a luxury consultant and entrepreneur, as well as a speaker, setting out to exactly what we're doing here today, capture and craft the story of African luxury.
Wow.
Africa on Luxury is a luxury education platform. And here we're chronicling the story of Africa.
Yes.
And drawing context from the creators, the tastemakers like Emuron that I have here today, and the connection to really just highlight and draw differentiation as to how our signature of luxury is different from the rest of the world.
True.
On each episode, and as we'll do today, we really have come all the way to Nairobi, and we are in this beautiful space, and you'll capture some of the stuff on our socials, just around the beautiful hive of creativity and design that is coming out of Nairobi this week. Africa on Luxury, Emuron, is also a space where really I'm not the master, but I'm seeking out.
Okay.
And so I'm here as a student and not necessarily
All right.
as an expert.
Okay.
And my questions really just probe what this cultural center has to offer. As I've mentioned today, we're speaking reconciling culture and creativity with Emuron Alemu. I loved how you sent me. I was like, this is a true wordsmith, because as a creative strategist and as a writer, you gave me the enunciation of your name, and I really appreciated that because I didn't want to butcher it. And to introduce Emuron, he's an all-round storyteller, constantly stretching the boundaries of his creativity, whether that be through writing, filmmaking, and delivering regionally nuanced advertising campaigns. He's articulate in weaving captivating narratives that connect culture and inspire audiences globally. Emuron is the founder, and he's my peer in the industry.
Yes.
He is the founder and chief creative officer of the Quollective.
Yes.
Is it Quollective? Because it's spelled with a Q, but it's sounded with a C.
Yes.
It's the Collective.
The Collective. Yes.
Which is a multi-disciplinary, and I really like this part, culture agency.
Yes.
So we've seen marketing agency, we've seen advertising agency, but this is a culture agency.
Culture agency. Yes.
And so he is well positioned to speak about culture and creativity today. And what the Collective does is bridge the gap and transcend the borders to deliver resonant and impactful brand stories. His career spans, and as young as he looks, over 2 decades. Over 2 decades, 34 plus African countries, and deeply rooted local insights from which he draws to deliver his award-winning creative. Some career highlights, shall we?
Okay.
We shall.
Yes.
He has written content for Netflix and voice, and you have to tell me about this one.
Okay.
Which production, and he's voiced characters for children's shows.
Yes.
I understand you've got something on Showmax.
Yes. Twende, I play the wildebeest.
The Wildebeest.
One of the wildebeest dad.
Oh, the dad.
Yeah.
I can see with the goatee, I can see that.
Yeah.
He's also a decorated creative with accolades, including recognition by Cannes, the Lions in particular, Dubai Lynx, a Grand Prix, the Grand Clios, as well as Leories, which are home. Well, South Africa, where I'm from, is home to the Leories.
Yes.
He's also part of the Cannes Lions, Leories, as well as the Clios jury, all prominent advertising and marketing industry awards. You ready to get in?
Ready.
Let's dive.
Yeah,
Okay,
let's
so
get in.
I mean, researching this episode and getting to immerse myself in your world, because this is what I do when I'm entering into these conversations.
Yeah.
I really wanted to broach and to start this conversation from the perspective that creativity and culture pervade each other.
That's true.
Right? And by definition, culture is an integrative process and appreciation of substance over time. The development of cultures happens through a dynamic process of societies defining their beliefs, conventions, and skills to form a code of common living.
Yes.
To that end, then, Emuron, and the symbiotic relationship that we see between culture and creativity, why are African stories worth telling?
African stories are worth telling simply because they're the most amazing stories to tell. African stories are rich. African stories are multidimensional. African stories are stories of love and war at the same time. Stories of kings and commoners. Stories of wealth and hardship. I think the most amazing thing about the African stories is not just the stories themselves, but how the stories are told.
Right.
Because it doesn't matter what story you've heard, doesn't matter how many different ways you've seen stories being told, you've never really gotten a true sense of storytelling until you hear an African storyteller telling an African story the African way. It's the most amazing thing. And the truth is, the African story is the human story because we did all originate from Africa. So it's a story that must be told, and a story that should be told simply because it's so dynamic and beautiful and rich.
And vibrant.
Yeah. And vibrant. It's
and
just,
deep and light at the same time.
Yes, yes.
It's all of that.
It's fun and it's serious. There's a moral to learn. There's a moral to the story. And some of them is just for the giggles, for the fun of it. So yeah.
For the heck of it. I love that because you're speaking about this duality, and we cannot look at an African story with an individual perspective.
No.
I love that you share the duality of being king and man or king and common at the same time.
Yeah.
Because we're able to occupy all those spaces at any given point. At any point in time, in any context, and with such ease.
Yes.
We move in and out of our, because it's all of the story is all of, this is our entire story rather. And it's beautiful that you shared that with us. Talk to me about what, in your view, are the most undervalued assets of our culture.
Well, there's a lot of about our culture that's undervalued. I think overall, when you look at the global culture landscape, the African culture is not as celebrated as ideally it should be. And yet it informs a lot of other cultures. There's various tenets to it, the visual assets of our culture, but I think the strongest honestly has to be language.
Language, okay.
Because yes, there's our oral histories and the history within our culture, and everyone is hunting for the depth of African history as a part of our culture. But language is, in my opinion, the most beautiful part of our culture and exceptionally undervalued. Let me give an example. Right now, as someone trying to explore the world, as an African, you'd probably be obsessed with improving your English vocabulary. Learning a second language, exactly.
Global language, yeah.
And your second language would be French. Or maybe Spanish. Everyone's now trying to figure out Mandarin because of
the influx.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But as an African doing business in
Africa,
in Nigeria, why am I not trying to figure out Hausa or Igbo? Why am I not learning Zulu from South Africa? Why am I not learning a different language, Kinyarwanda, for example? Simply because we do not value the languages we own as much as we value the rest of the world's languages. But when you think about it, there is no cultural asset we have that adds so much flavor to every situation. Because I can tell you an amazing story in the most perfect Queen's English. But if I tell you that same story in my own local dialect.
Now that's evocative.
It's a completely different story.
Now there's a spirit that comes through.
There's a spirit to it.
Because the people that back the language, the language itself chronicles the people and the richness and the history from where the people are coming from. And I must tell you, I was speaking to my sister yesterday, and I was saying to her, there's a magic that I'm sensing being in Nairobi. I'm not sure, and the last time I felt like this has been a while. And I said to her, it is most unfortunate that we're not as dual in being able to be African in every context, because boardrooms may require us to be something else, whereas the creative industry, excuse me, in particular, is perhaps a space that allows us the full view of our expression.
Yes.
And I was saying to her that I feel like I've met a part of myself here, because whether I'm on the other side of the continent, the extreme east of the continent, or on the bottom there in the south, I am still African.
Yes.
So beyond my color, beyond my language, I am African first.
Yes.
So I love what you're saying there about language. And what would you say are some of the contemporary factors that are shaping culture? Because I think culture is a concept that it ought to evolve,
Yes.
as times themselves evolve. So what would you say are some of the now contemporary factors that are currently shaping culture? And we were speaking about this just behind the scenes, or before the camera came on. I'd love for you to get into some of that.
Well, I think the digitalization of the continent is shaping how our culture is going to evolve. The way people are communicating, the way people are getting a better understanding, and the ability to find the information about culture in particular, and to get an understanding of what the rest of the world is doing with their culture and making the most of it. I think that's what's really shaping the ability to almost own culture your own way and adapt it to today's world. Personalization, indeed, because when you look at the younger audiences, for example, there is a stronger desire to understand culture and to own it and to be part of it. But then there's also a very strong need for self-expression. And for them, it's like, great, we will take the culture, we will understand it, we will explore what the rest of the world is doing, and we will figure out how to make this bit of culture our very own as a new generation and also as individuals. So yeah, I think digitalization, because it's really allowing people to explore culture in ways they couldn't before. Because prior, you were told this is the culture and that's that. And you do this, you do that. Why? Because it's always been done that way. But now with digitalization, you're seeing the way parts of Asia are re-adapting their culture for today's world, and parts of South America. And you're like, okay, if they're doing that there, we can actually do it in a doper way over here by understanding our culture, adapting it this way for us right now.
And where does tradition then sit? Because, we are informing, basically we are also part of the authors of culture.
Yes.
And we are informing culture as we move daily, as we make decisions daily. So where does tradition then sit in the context of culture?
Tradition sits really as a foundation.
Tradition and customs, actually.
Yes. So tradition and those customs sit really as a foundation. And today they're more or less a suggestion on what or how you should behave. But the basis of, and again, going back to the point about digitalization, understanding why did people do this that way? Because it came from a different time. But when you understand the why, it becomes easier to adapt it to the now. So they stay as the foundation. These were the customs. This is how it was done. But greater still is, this is why it was done that way. And once you understand that, you're like, okay, great. This will still stay our base. But the house that we build on top of it, we can keep moving things around.
It's dynamic.
It's dynamic.
Okay.
Yeah, so the same way you can repurpose your kitchen or repaint certain walls or destroy parts of your house to rebuild, is the same way we're going to be doing that, while maintaining our traditions and customs as the base, the foundation.
Rooting ourselves in that.
Yes, the bedrock, yes.
It's typically said of Africans that if you want to hide something, put it in books.
Yes.
A controversial statement, but probably true to some degree.
Yeah.
And as a writer, I mean, what are the gaps that you're seeing or the current state? And at the same time, again, the duality being that we're very educated as Africans.
Yes.
So it's odd that there's still a huge part of our populations that are not accessing information.
Yes.
And digitalization, and I'm borrowing from that statement, you're speaking about digitalization and how are you, and being in the industry, in the creative industries, what are you seeing as the state of that statement as of today?
So I think the statement is, if you want to hide something, put it in a book. But I think it should be amended. Put it in a paper book.
Put it in something printed.
Yes, because right now, when you look at the statistics on the scroll, on online platforms and how people reading through information, people going through more pages online than people used to read books. So the average numbers of the youth in particular, just going and getting information from online platforms and scrolling, is significantly greater than what the ideal target would be for the pages of a book.
I'm with you.
So they're not leafing through books as much as people used to in the past, but they're finding information on their mobile devices. And it's really about moving that information. So it's the ebook, it's the website, it's the blog. It's putting that on a digital platform, ensuring that if you want that information to get out, put it on the phone.
Make it go viral.
It will go viral. People will read it. And the truth is, the younger audiences are hungry for information, and they will take their phone out and they will find it there. But greater still, African knowledge and the passing of African knowledge historically wasn't through reading.
It was through stories.
Stories and conversations.
You've landed it there.
You see, so our natural state is to go places and to meet people and to talk, to group around the fireside, which might be a bar table where there's banter.
Today,
And when you look again, and I keep talking about younger Africans, they'll get on a bus to go somewhere to just sit with different people and have a conversation. So, yeah, very true. It is true that hide it in a book, but then the true sense of who we are as books, when you look at the griots of old, the books were people. The information you have, you're a book, I'm a book. And having this conversation, I'm reading your pages, and you're reading my pages.
I get that. Yeah. And given that, and I'm aware that there's somewhere, as I was doing my research, that there's more, and I see you referencing mobile a lot in terms of where people are accessing this information, which also prompts the fact that we should be creating more for digital, particularly for a particular audience, the younger audience. But given some of the infrastructural challenges, I suppose our digital development will not be as advanced, or maybe I'm making a bad assumption. But what is your sense, particularly because you would work with clients that you have to create for, or you would judge work that is maybe created for digital first?
Yes.
So I'm keen just to understand whether we are right there with the rest of the world in terms of digital access and data, right? There is the real sentiment that data also remains something, because you may have a device but not the data to access the information.
True. Well, the numbers are there. Smartphone penetration, not like the rest of the world. Data or accessibility to it, not up there with the world. But I think the saying goes, necessity is the mother of invention. So in spite of not necessarily having, and look, Kenya is an anomaly in that data is more accessible.
Okay.
Right? In most of the country, in terms of affordability and just presence and reliability. But for most of the continent, it's not necessarily the case. But that's not going to prevent the young African from finding what they need. They'll figure out where data is available. It's the story of a security guard, for example, who waits till they get to the building where they work, and then they download all the information that they need. They go look at they look at offline pages and they decide, this is what I want. When I get to the building, I'll download everything, and when I leave, I'll go study. When I leave, I'll go watch the video. So we might not be where the world is technologically, but we are ahead in terms of ingenuity. Because necessity.
We are an ingenious bunch.
Yes.
And you're right about Kenya being an anomaly, because I was connected stepping off the plane, straight at the airport. I had a second mobile device. I got a SIM card. I was able to communicate with home. So I experienced that myself as well. The concept of luxury can be interpreted differently by different consumers.
Yes.
And I mean, as we're speaking, there's this thought that's lingering in my mind just around how we as consumers are constantly shaping culture.
True.
And here we're speaking about culture and creativity in the broad sense, but I do want to bring the conversation closer to the implication of that on luxury. And consumers, based on their culture, there's a setting, there's a context that I think is quite important to consider.
Yeah.
So in the broad sense, I mean, there's certain things that we can generalize cross-culturally.
Yes.
And this bears influence on the heterogeneous nature of culture. However, looking at a space like luxury or even culture itself, or even better yet, creativity, you're constantly customizing, and I think there's a word that always stands out when we have these conversations, and it feels like personalization and customization of culture seems to be teasing itself out. What is your sense on the luxury landscape of Kenya? And I think asking this question sitting at Design Week,
yes,
really a space that is, I mean, the room is beautiful. Really a space where we're seeing craftsmanship at the highest standard come through. And one of my previous guests, we were speaking about branding made in Africa luxury.
Yes.
And walking in here today, I saw made in Kenya, because we were speaking about the relationship between made in Africa and made in whatever the region that is. Let's speak then about, can we customize? And I think you've partially answered this question. Or suppose, how do we customize culture or creativity?
Yeah.
Or both?
Can we? Definitely, we're already doing it.
We're already
doing it. I had a long debate last week about, so in Kenya there's a language that's part of the subcultures, which is called Sheng. Sheng. Yeah, it's an offshoot of Swahili. So it's like a slang. It's street language. But then Sheng, within Nairobi alone, you can identify where someone or which hood someone reps by the Sheng that they speak. And when you speak of luxury, so of course provenance is key. Where does it come from? And at the end of the day, buying knives from Japan, luxurious. Buying wines from France, for example. So Africans are starting to understand or believe strongly in the fact that leather from Kenya, for example, you saw the store right outside.
Sandstorm, yeah.
Exactly. So we are getting to a point in time whereby provenance from Africa, from a part of Africa, where something is exceptional, is something that we are accepting to be luxurious. And in terms of customization, I think beyond customizing culture, if you look specifically at the luxury landscape, the true essence, the epitome of true luxury is one of one.
One of one.
What I'm wearing right now was made specifically for me with a fabric that was made for me.
Who's that? Even the fabric was,
yes,
sir.
Yes.
Backtrack.
A selection of the fabric. Wasn't made by a Kenyan. There's a Nigerian designer called Kobo.
Right.
But he made for me, cut it for me, and selected fabric for me.
Love.
So luxury in its purest essence is getting that which does not exist anywhere else, which
Rarity.
No one else, exactly.
Rarity.
It's like the gems. So to walk around and say, look, here's a piece that might not be perfect, but it's perfect for me. And yes, I can give this to you.
And it doesn't look like any other piece.
It doesn't look like anything you'll find anywhere else. So I'll tell you what's really interesting that's happening right now. So I don't know if it's the same in South Africa, but in Kenya and most of East Africa, a lot of the clothing that we get is secondhand.
Yeah,
yes.
There's the shipping containers.
Yes, the shipping containers come in, and then you go to places like Ikomba or Toy Market.
It's exactly the same. Yeah.
And before it was a case of budget shopping because it's cheaper or more affordable for me to go to Toy Market or Ikomba and get a T-shirt than it is for me to go to a store in a shopping
I'm gonna
mall.
need that address.
So what young Kenyans are doing now is they're repurposing that, and it's now thrift shopping because they're getting that.
Yes.
They're adapting it and creating pieces
that are
only for you. It's again one of one. You're not going to find that piece anywhere else. But the more interesting bit is now they're looking at shipping these things back to where they came from as luxury items. So in terms of customization, I think customization is one of the truest forms of luxury.
Oh my God.
To have something that was made for me and no one else. So with culture, if we want our culture to be one that's truly aligned to the luxury manifesto or the luxury ethos, we customize the different tenets, the language, the sounds, the aesthetic to be ours in our little subcultures and within our different markets and of course the continent, such that it's identifiable as uniquely ours.
That is so good on so many levels because it speaks to our resourcefulness. Yes. The things that you are dumping on us, we will curate back to you.
There we go.
As items that are priced for luxury.
Exactly.
I love that. I love that so much. Which cultures are influences of our creative identity here in Kenya? And I'm really looking to get either the tribal or, you know, a sense from that into, I mean, think Kenya and think, you naturally think Maasai.
Yes.
And I know there's a fashion designer that I'm also speaking to while I'm here that's creating beautiful works from the traditional Maasai sentiment.
Yes.
So what are some of those other cultures? Because I suppose the Maasai is very well exported to the rest of the world, but what are some of, and the print is recognizable.
Yes, yes.
And what are some of those cultures here or tribes or centers here that are really shaping the creative identity of how Kenya is coming out to the world right now?
So we're a country of 40 plus tribes.
Oh my God.
Yes.
I thought South Africa was worse.
No, 40 plus tribes. But what happens is...
Heritage.
Yes. What happens is Maasai culture, as you said, well exported. Every little culture has its contribution to this melting pot. And when you look, for example, at Swahili culture from the coast, so a lot of, well, it's not the tribe specifically, but the coastal culture and what that means for our food and our spices and the teas that we drink. When you look at Kikuyu culture and how that relates to how business is done, every single tribe has, in one way or another, its form of contribution, some greater than the other. But the truest contributor to Kenyan culture right now is the street culture. Youth
that's
culture.
Interesting because that's shaped by us.
Yes, and it's the youth culture. And the youth are starting to dictate the way we behave, the way we what we buy, what we consider to be cool. Because again, there's a debate about luxury and culture, and the creative space. Does the creative space dictate culture, or does culture dictate the creative space?
It's that pervasive relationship between the two.
So who decides what's luxury? Well, youth culture right now, yes. But youth culture in such a strong way. Because you'll find right now a lot of what younger people are wearing is what older people are starting to pick up. And particular bits of music and the way they talk. So youth culture and street culture is really shaping a lot of how we consume. Because again, as I mentioned, melting pot, it's the cities that bring everyone together. All the different tribes, and you find the commonalities, and then you sprinkle the differences on this one massive pie of this is who we are as a unit, and let's add now the different flavors to it from this tribe and that tribe and that tribe. Street culture and youth culture.
And we are all these people. We are all these things and all these people because we can draw from Kikuyu culture more if we so desire at a particular point in time. We can leverage the Swahili culture if we so desire. And I think the youth are really challenging every boundary and perhaps in a way that we need, in a way that's necessary.
Because what they do, it's a bit of an oxymoron because the youth seem to be, so I come from a generation that was rebelling against culture, right? The youth right now are actually seeking this culture. They want to understand it. They want to understand the cultures, the traditions, and the customs. But then they're also the most
non-conformist. They want to then derive.
Yeah,
they want to derive what they want to derive from it.
We will respect it. We will find it, we will understand it, but we will not conform. And when you put that together, it's this explosion of color and flavor and language in a way that respects the old, but it's advancing into the future. So yeah.
Yeah, so it isn't odd to, there's this odyssey to just, we're on a journey.
Yeah.
And for me, I think as I travel the continent and have these conversations, it's beautiful to discover those perspectives and on that journey, because it would be amiss for me to just sit where I'm sitting and hope to derive any strong position or strong opinion or understanding.
Yeah.
So I love that. Perhaps I might join that revolution.
You must. And whether you join it or not, it will.
It will.
Yes. It's going to dictate what you purchase tomorrow.
It will.
It's going to dictate where you're spending your money, where you're living, what you're buying. Yeah.
You spoke about leather, and interestingly, my sister says to me, "Oh, you're in Kenya. Please bring me a leather bag."
Yes.
What are some of the other cultural, also other crafts that have come out of Kenya? Because I was speaking to the barista this morning having breakfast, and he was telling me about Kenyan coffee. But what are some of those rich, purely, authentically sort of Kenyan contributions to culture, space, luxury?
I know tea is not originally Kenyan, because obviously it was imported. But Kenyan tea, hands down, when you look at what the world has to offer, right up there. In terms of craft, specifically art, and I know the fine art space is still growing, but when you look at Kenyan art and craftsmanship and sculpting, and when you go around and you see some of the spaces and what people are doing, what Kenya is offering to the world is going to be, I don't think the world's ready for it yet. But in terms of craft, and again, craft, from my understanding, is not just hands.
Yeah.
Kenyan filmmaking and storytelling. Because Kenya has perfected the art of observing the best of what the world has to offer and then making it their own. So bringing the world's best practice, and I think Kenya's been doing that for 30, 40 years.
Okay.
They'll go and explore. They'll see the way the rest of the world does it. They will understand the perfection of particular skills and then bring it back home and say, okay, great. We now know how to make the steak, but let's get the Kenyan ingredient and put that in there.
Let's get the beef.
Let's put the beef. Let's get a Kenyan cow, put that in there. Let's get some of the spices, put that in there.
I love that.
So yeah.
I love that, because it's true to what culture ought to offer.
Yeah.
And I think as we wind up, what is luxury to you? What is your ultimate luxury?
To me, as an individual.
To you.
Or,
because I think and this is why we have these conversations, because we are together crafting what the definition of African luxury is. Because luxury, even as a Western concept, is still not definitive.
Yeah.
And therefore, as Africans, it's important that we are clear in discovering what African luxury is for us.
Yes,
and it's very personal. It's an individualistic experience, but collectively we're able to come and enjoy it together. So what in your definition is luxury, and what is your ultimate luxury?
So I guess when you look at luxury, first we'll start with the definition of it. It really is comfort and elegance, right? Is if you look for dictionary definition. I genuinely feel being African is luxurious.
Oh, wow.
And the truth is, when you think of a picture of Africa, it's not a positive picture per se. It's hardship. That's a story, the narrative that you get. But to be African is to sit atop a hill and look at square miles of beautiful grass.
Vastness.
Without,
beauty.
like, I go to my village and that's what happens. I go to visit relatives in the village and I'm going to sit atop a hill and just sit there and look at that. To eat a pineapple from Uganda, for example, is luxurious. Because when you travel the world and eat what the rest of the world is eating, you're like, it's tragic. Honestly,
tragic being the right word.
You know, because we get the best of the best. It's African weather. Is to wake up on a random day, step out to your balcony and have the sun just hit you right.
That African butter.
Exactly. So it's to be African is luxurious, but if I was to look at luxury as luxury, for me, it might not be even just the bespoke items. It's true luxury for me is freedom.
Love that.
It is freedom, and it's to be able to wake up and go where you want to go. I'll tell you a scenario. So I was at a party once, and I met these two, a brother and a sister, and they were traveling to Kenya. And in my conversations with them, some things became clear. One, they hadn't figured out a hotel. They'd just come for the party. They hadn't figured out where they were going to stay. They're like, yeah, we'll figure it out.
We'll sleep somewhere.
We'll sleep somewhere. Or we'll go over to Dar es Salaam or whatever it is. To have the ability to go to any part of the world, be in any part of the world, and do that which you want in the moment that you want to do it. Not to have to plan for it.
Not to.
It is to have your every desire. Just like when
that is
America,
true luxury.
Prince Akeem wants something, boom, it shows up. So it's that luxury is freedom. The freedom to be and do that which you want whenever you feel like it.
I've never heard that before.
So that.
And I think it is so beautiful to the extent that I then am really having a truly luxurious experience being in Kenya and in Nairobi today because I did exactly that. My travel plans were only confirmed a day or two ago.
Yes.
Overnight, I had my visa.
Yes.
I packed at 3 a.m. before flying out at 9. And I'm here. And to be able to have connected and had such great reception from people like yourself, where we did meet digitally.
Yes.
And here we are sitting today having this conversation about this in itself being a luxurious moment.
Very true.
The fact that we have the pleasure of stopping and reflecting on this beautiful human experience we're having as Africans.
Yeah.
I have absolutely enjoyed this conversation.
So
Thank you very much.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, it's a wrap.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Yeah.